Welcome to the 48th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Today we are doing a full breakdown of UFC Fight Night Yair Rodriguez versus Max Holloway. After that, we're going to talk about some fight news and some fight announcements that have happened recently, and a lot of that is going to be centered around the welterweight division. So if you're interested in that, that will be in the news section, and we're going to end it off by looking forward to next week's fight card, which is headlined by Tate and Vieira. So to get it started straight off, we're going to talk about Max Holloway and Yair Rodriguez. Now, Max Holloway and Yair Rodriguez went in there and put on an absolute war. This is, I think, a month in a row now. We've had absolute wars for main events, and Yair Rodriguez and Max Holloway did not disappoint. Now, this fight was a lot closer than a lot of people expected, and I am one of those people. I thought that Max Holloway was going to go out there and get a 50-44 or a 50-43 unanimous decision victory. Now, Yair Rodriguez proved to me and a lot of other people wrong. He won at least one round, I think, and you can make a case he won 2 rounds. Whether he won 1 or 2 rounds at the end of the day doesn't really make that big of a difference, but he won a round, which is something not many people expected him to do based off some of the performances we've seen from Max Holloway recently. And I was really impressed with Yair Rodriguez's game plan. His game plan of kicking that lead leg of Max Holloway, was a tremendous game plan. One of the biggest critiques that you could have of Max's striking is that when someone is landing a low kick consistently, it's going to really, really mess with his rhythm. And I think that is what we saw early. When you look at guys like Kelvin Kattar, Kelvin wasn't landing a lot of leg kicks, and Max was able to find a rhythm early and dominate that whole fight. Now, when you look at the fights with Volkanovski, the first fight especially, Max absorbed a lot of leg kicks. The second fight was not quite as many. The story of that fight wasn't as much leg kicks, and Max was a lot closer to winning that fight, and you could make the case that he did win that fight. So Yair Rodriguez recognized that, and he utilized the low kicks very well. Now, he was able to use those low kicks to set up some higher kicks, to set up some body kicks, to land some head kicks even. Problem being is that Max Holloway might be the hardest fighter in the UFC to knock out. For whatever reason, Max has a ridiculous chin, and he was able to absorb a lot of big strikes from Yair. And whether that be a head kick, whether that be a couple really nice 1-2s, whether that be the elbow that Yair landed, Max Holloway absorbed a lot of big shots here. And I think that is something that he needs to fix in the future. And just because you can take shots doesn't mean you need to. And I think that's something that, he knows. That's not something that is a wild critique that, is coming out of left field. That's, pretty common thought. And despite all that, Max Holloway put on a tremendous performance. And what I like so much about this performance is that Max Holloway utilized some skills that he hadn't had to utilize in a significant amount of time. And that's his offensive wrestling. And I don't want to say he had to use the wrestling, but he was, he lost the first round, pure striking, and when he started to implement some wrestling, the fight really started to move in his favor. He landed some good ground and pound strikes that really cut Yair open and really bruised him up. Now, I don't want to say that Max Holloway had to do that to win, but it made his path to victory much, much easier. You can stand on the feet and let Yair chop away at your lead leg, or you can go for a takedown and, control. I think he controlled a good portion of the third round and the fourth round on the ground. And that's not something we usually see Max Holloway do, but it's something that he needed to do to get an easier win in this fight, and good on him for going and doing that. Because a lot of guys wouldn't swallow their pride, when you build up this name of being the best boxer in the UFC, a lot of people would be apprehensive to go for a takedown after building that brand, but Max Holloway wasn't, which is something that I respect. And I think the grappling has probably been a higher emphasis in his training camps, I imagine. And when you look at the second fight, one of the big reasons that Volkanovski won that fight was because he was able to secure a late takedown there. I believe it was the 5th round. I haven't watched that fight in a long time. But, the wrestling is really what propelled Volkanovski to win those final rounds and win those championship rounds and walk away with a victory. So I imagine that has been something that Max has worked on recently, and it showed in this fight, and it paid off for him very well. Now, both of these guys are in pretty good positions moving forward. I don't think that because Yair lost, he dropped any stock at all. I don't think anyone is thinking lesser of Yair Rodriguez after this performance. I would say that he has impressed people despite the loss. Now, for Max Holloway, he has a lot of tremendous options. And for me, I think we need to see the Volkanovski trilogy fight, and I say that because these two guys are very clearly the best and second best featherweights in the planet. Max Holloway went out there and beat 2 contenders, and one of those was probably good enough to get him a title shot just off the Kelvin Kattar performance, and he decided to risk it and go with Yair Rodriguez instead, coming off an injury as well. The first fight was canceled because of an injury, so the second attempt at going at Yair, he's coming off an injury as well, which makes his performance even more impressive. So I think Max has earned that right to a title shot, regardless of, if you want to see that. A lot of people don't really want to see that because we've already seen it twice, but I think some context matters here. If Volkanovski would have finished Max in both those fights, I think that this fight wouldn't make sense regardless of how well Max was performing. However, when you consider the fact that one was a pretty straightforward unanimous decision for Volkanovski, the other was a fight that is 3-2 for either guy. You could score that. And I think the conflict of who won that second fight makes this a third fight a lot easier to book. And the other reason that I want to see Max Holloway take on Alexander Volkanovski is I don't want to see Max juggle 2 weight classes. We saw him do that before. He went up and took on Poirier, and he lost that fight. And in that fight, you see that there's a big difference in terms of the power between these two guys, right? And I think that's probably the largest reason that Max lost that fight. If Max goes up to 155 and takes on a Conor, I think Conor would be an easier matchup for Max than a Poirier would be, based off Conor's, I don't want to say Conor has bad cardio, but Conor has, average cardio at best. And Max is, one of the best in that department of all time. And I think Max Holloway raining down, a 20-piece combo on Conor McGregor would do bad things to Conor. So I think a Conor matchup would be easier than a Poirier matchup. However, regardless, if you're Max Holloway and you move up to 155, I think you need to commit to 155. I don't want to see, Max go up to 155 and take on Conor and then come back down to 145 because you're not going to be able to gain any size. I think that the move to 155 provides you with a safety net if you lose to Volkanovski a third time. If Max Holloway loses to Volkanovski a third time, we will never see that fight again. You just can't make that fight with two guys who, when one of them has won all 3 fights, it really just doesn't make any sense at that point. And then if you're Max and you lose to Volkanovski a third time, you can bump up to 155. But the biggest thing is Max has to take the time and put on some body mass to kind of increase his power and, make his power to something where those 155 pounders have to respect. So if we see Max move to 155, I want it to be a full commitment. And, could he do that now without pursuing the Volkanovski trilogy? I guess so. But I think that would close the door on featherweight for Max Holloway. And I wouldn't be opposed to, Max taking on Volkanovski. Win or lose, he moves to 155. Or maybe he does Volkanovski. And the real question here is, if Max beats Volkanovski in the trilogy, what becomes of the fourth fight? Because if Max beats Volkanovski, the guy with the belt would have 2 losses to the number 1 contender. Do you run that back for a 4th time? And then if Max wins again, do you run it for a 5th time? Because now they're 2-2. So it gets to the point of, at what point do we stop this? And I think this is going to stop when Max Holloway moves up to when he moves up to 155. I think this move is going to come eventually. However, before we see that move, like I said, I think we'd need to see Max Holloway versus Alexander Volkanovski. And either way, after that fight, Max is going to have options moving forward. So that is something that I am looking at for Max. And then for Yair, I think this is pretty easy. And let's take note of this, that Yair does have, something wrong with his foot, right? After the fight, the foot was very swollen. And could it be broken? Yes. Is it likely that it's broken? Yes. Now, usually when we're in that scenario, I say, we'll wait, let them recover, and then we'll talk about booking them later. However, in this case, I don't, think that is necessary. I think we can book Yair Rodriguez right now, and I think that opponent should be Brian Ortega. This makes sense for many, many reasons. First of all, you've got Brian Ortega, who is coming off a loss to the champ, Alexander Volkanovski, and you've got Yair Rodriguez, who's coming off a loss to Max Holloway. The undisputed 2 best featherweights in the world, number 1 and 2, Volkanovski, Holloway, and the losers pair them up with each other, Ortega, Rodriguez, and from there, you have Brian Ortega, who is not going to fight soon, right? Brian Ortega took a lot of damage. He's going to take some time off. Yair Rodriguez needs time off. I think Ortega versus Rodriguez is the fight to make. I don't think this fight happens anytime soon. That's not what I'm saying. This fight might be in July of next year. It could be in October of next year. I don't think we're going to see either of them in action relatively soon. But I think that's the fight when they're both ready that you need to make. And if you really want to put a cherry on top of that, you have another fight night card in Mexico City and have Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez. One guy who lives in Mexico, I believe Yair lives in Mexico. I might be mistaken on that, but both guys who are Mexican, I think that would be a tremendous thing in terms of the UFC wanting to spread their global appeal, and I think that would be a very, very strong move to make for the UFC, and I think it would be electric and would be a tremendous fight. And if you want, you could do a pay-per-view in Mexico City and have it headlined by Moreno, assuming he is still the champ. You could have, another title fight maybe, and you can have this be a 5-rounder on the card. There's a lot of good options here for that Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez bout. Moving on, we have got Ben Rothwell in the co-main event against Marcos Rodriquez. Nice. Against Lima, right? Now, this is a situation, you know what, first of all, Lima had a tremendous performance here, and he beat up Ben Rothwell bad, right? Give him the credit before we start, to tear into the officiating, but give Lima his credit, great performance. Now, the number one thing here that we're seeing is officials. Now, this is not to pick on Herb Dean, but this is an officiating problem that I think we see often. The official has to be decisive, right? You can't play this, I'm going to stop it. Not going to stop it. Or you can't do the, did you get eye poked? Let me wait and see if the fighter reacts. If you see an eye poke, step in, stop the fight, or break the action. If you see a strike to the groin, step in, stop the action. If you are gonna stop the fight because someone's getting beat up, stop the fight. Don't play this game where we hop in, to see if someone reacts. Just stop the fight. Because not stopping the fight and doing this thing where you touch somebody, if you touch for example, if this scenario would have played out differently, and Herb Dean runs in and grabs Lima by the waist, and then he stops, and Ben Rothwell, lands a big right hand and knocks Lima out. He didn't know the fight was ended. He only touched Lima. So, that would have been chaos. So we just have to make sure that officiating is decisive. If you're going to make a call, make the call with your chest. And I think that would solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing from officials. And I think for the most part, we have a lot of good officials in this sport. And most of the time, we just see small mistakes that have big consequences. And I think that kind of lowers the opinion of referees in general. But, Herb Dean isn't a bad official. He just made a mistake here. And that mistake, in this scenario, wasn't very costful. In other scenarios, that could have presented major problems. So, moving forward, just be decisive. That's all I've got to say about that. Now, we are going to skip over the women's featherweight fight of Felicia Spencer and Leah Letson. Really, all that happened was Felicia Spencer dominated. And, I don't like talking about this women's featherweight division because it seems like that division is going to, disappear when Amanda Nunes retires. So in 3 weeks, or, if Amanda Nunes retires in December, which is, a month away, and, this division is poof. So I'm not going to sit here and speculate about the women's featherweight division just for it to get cut. So no sense in that. Now at welterweight, At welterweight, we had Miguel Baeza versus Chaos Williams. Now, this fight was a fight I was looking forward to. I really like both of these guys. Chaos Williams is a terrific fighter to watch, a very powerful guy. Miguel Baeza, also very powerful guy, and someone who got up to a hot start, 10-0. Top prospect in that welterweight division. They put on a really, really good fight, and Chaos Williams eventually landed the big shot to put Baeza away. Both of these guys, very, very talented. I know Baeza has 2 losses in a row, but I think this is a scenario where you've got a talented guy, and you just need to slow down, who they're fighting. Just slow down the level of competition. Chaos Williams is, a tough fight for just about anybody. And to put in someone like Baeza you just got to slow it down is what I'm saying here. Moving forward for both of these guys are going to put on fun fights, going to put on strong performances. So where do we go with them? I'd like to see Chaos Williams against, another scrapper, like a Nico Price, like a Tim Means, maybe a Randy Brown, someone of that caliber. And for Miguel Baeza, like I said, slow it down a little bit. It all depends. A lot of these guys here, I'm looking at the world rankings, and, a lot of these guys that are around Baeza, you don't really know, what their future holds. Like, for example, Cerrone, Matt Brown, where are we going with these guys in the future? James Krause, is still fighting, but he's also very serious about coaching. Cowboy Oliveira. Where are we going with some of these guys? So, you don't really know what you could. I don't know what you could do with him. But I think we need to see a drop in competition because he's still a talented guy that we shouldn't throw in the absolute mix quite yet. But keep him on the UFC roster. Throw him against some respectable guys, just not guys that, like Cass Williams, like Pereira, give him a couple fights before we put him back in that caliber of competition. At bantamweight, we had Song Yadong versus Julio Arsei. Song Yadong picked up another knockout victory, and he is someone who has been impressive once again. And Song Yadong is in a really interesting spot where he's got some losses, but he's still a really talented guy. And I think he's going to stay just outside the rankings of the bantamweight division here. Oh, he's at 15. I'm an idiot. That's my bad. But I still think he needs to fight someone unranked. I don't think right now you throw him in there against anyone above him because those names above him right now in that division need to fight each other, I believe. You could throw him, Song Yadong wouldn't be a bad matchup if Sean O'Malley wins. He already fought Casey Kenny, maybe a Ronnie Barcelos, maybe a Brian Kelleher. If Yanez picks up a win, does he fight this weekend? Yanez is fighting soon. If Yanez picks up a win, yes, Yanez is fighting this weekend. If Yanez picks up a win, that would be a tremendous fight. You've got Saeed Nurmagomedov, Jack Shore, right? There's a lot of good fighters at this 135-pound division. Umar Nurmagomedov. There's a lot of good fighters at this 135-pound division. And I think that you could go a lot of ways with Song Yadong. I'd like to see him against someone who is a bright prospect. I think Song Yadong would be a good litmus test for someone working their way into those rankings. And then you've got Joel Alvarez, who put on a great performance against Thiago Moises, and that's the type of win that you need at 155 pounds to get you some respect, right? Because there is so many good fighters at 155 pounds, and you can't just be talented, you have to be talented, and then you have to put on great performances against a tremendous fighter, a very talented fighter like Moises. You've got your Moises, your Drew Dober, your guys like that who aren't, Moises was ranked, he's going to be unranked now, but your Bobby Greens, your Ally Quintas, where there's a lot of tremendous ranked fighters. And frankly, if you want to get in those rankings, you have to put on a tremendous performance against some really, really strong fighters. And like I've said for a long time, the 155-pound division might be the deepest division. In between 135, 145, and 155, I don't really like splitting hairs. We were just talking about the 135-pound division and all the talent it has, and 155 is, a tremendous division. Joel Alvarez has really put a stamp on, his path to these rankings. Once you get ranked, you have a lot more, options. Getting to those rankings sometimes can be the most difficult part, and it's Monday today, so the new rankings haven't been updated, and I'm interested to see who's going to take that 15 slot in those lightweight rankings, whether it be Joel Alvarez. Is it going to be Damir Ismagulov, who has a win over Moises and Joel Alvarez? Is it going to be Matez Gamrot? Is it going to be, probably won't be Drew Dober? Is it going to, there's a lot. Is it going to be Bobby Green, who just put on a great performance? Is it going to be Guram, Kutseladze? There's a lot of really strong competition. You've got your Grant Dawson's, who's got one loss. You've got your Mark Madsen's, who's undefeated. So there is so much talent running around, and those guys aren't even really sniffing the rankings quite yet. There's still a lot of guys that I've named before them that are in great spots. You've got Nasrat, who a lot of people really like, but is coming off a loss. There's a lot of talent at 155. Mark Diakese, is a tremendous fighter. I know doesn't have a lot of wins, as of late, but you can't, the talent is obvious. Ottoman, Azatir, there is a lot of good things happening at 155 pounds right now. And Uros Medic, well, he's got a loss, but he was in a really good spot before that. So, like always, if it's a lightweight fight, it's going to be two talented guys. And I think Joel Alvarez kind of went on a little bit of a rant there, but he's putting himself in a very strong position moving forward. The last fight we're going to talk about on Rodriguez versus Holloway is Cynthia Calvillo versus Andrea Lee. Andrea Lee, gets probably the best win of her career. What is next for her moving forward? Regardless of, if she can beat Valentina Shevchenko, Cynthia Calvillo was the highest ranked fighter to not fight Shevchenko. Andrea Lee was sitting at 12, goes out there and gets a finish. So it'll be interesting to see how high she moves up in those rankings. I think Viviane Araújo could make sense. You've got Jennifer Maia, Lauren Murphy, no longer Joanne Calderwood. Now it's just Joanne Wood because she married a guy with the last name Wood. So Joanne Wood is fighting this weekend. So I think she's going to have a lot to say over that next title fight, especially if she can get a win. Maybe you do Joanne Wood if she wins, or Talia Santos versus Andrea Lee. We'll get some more clarity on that division after this week, I think. Now we are going to get started on the news section, and the biggest piece of news that we had over the last week was that Jorge Masvidal is out of his fight with Leon Edwards. Now, there are a lot of questions here about what is going to happen at 170, and we have some answers to some of those questions, so we're going to start with that. The first thing is we've got Belal Muhammad is going to take on Wonderboy. Now, the more booked fights we get in this division, the more answers we get. I wouldn't have been surprised if Wonderboy would have stepped up and fought Leon Edwards, and I also wouldn't have been surprised if Belal Muhammad took on Khamzat Chimaev. So those two are going to go up against one another, and we'll see how that plays out, but that takes away two possible fighters that could fight Leon or Khamzat. Now, with that Khamzat question of who's Khamzat going to fight, it looks like we're getting an answer. Now, this fight is not booked. This fight is being talked about, and Gilbert Burns is down. So spoiled the surprise there. The UFC is looking at booking Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev. First of all, Gilbert Burns said he was down, and I imagine that is all that needs to happen. This is, a fight that would put Khamzat Chimaev one win away from a title fight. So I think that this is, an opportunity that he would not deny. So I imagine that this fight is going to get booked. I don't think, if Gilbert said he was down and Khamzat did not say he was down, but I imagine he's not going to get a better opportunity right now, so he'll probably take that fight. Now, those were two guys who were on the short list to fill in to fight Leon Edwards on December 11th. So that leaves us with the question of who is Leon going to fight on December 11th. And I think the answer to that is going to be nobody. With what we've got right now, they're, looking at the rankings, Leon Edwards is number 3. If Gilbert fights Khamzat, that takes him out. And Colby's number 1, so that fight isn't going to happen. Wonderboy at 5 is booked. Chiesa at 6 fights this weekend. So if he gets a win and calls him out, maybe we could see that. We'll talk about that if that happens next week. And then you've got Jorge at 7. That fight's obviously not going to happen. And no way Leon Edwards accepts Neil Magny, who's 8, or anyone below him. And that leaves us with one name. That one name being Vicente Luque. Now, would Vicente Luque accept the fight against Leon Edwards on 1 month's notice is the question. Now, what's the answer? I'm not sure, because Luque cut to 170 about 3 weeks ago. He was the backup for Covington and Usman, but there has been rumors about a Luque versus Nate Diaz fight that was supposed to happen in December. So has he been training for a December fight already? That is a possibility. However, would Vicente Luque risk his opportunity to fight Nate Diaz so that he could fight Leon Edwards? We're unclear on that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Leon Edwards ends up not fighting on December 11th and we see him, possibly get a title shot. The date for this Gilbert Burns and Khamzat Chimaev fight has not been announced. So if that happens in December, they could steal this title fight away from Leon Edwards. So we're really just going to have to wait and see how that plays out. But that's kind of a look into where we're currently at in the welterweight division and who will be fighting for that belt next. And outside of the welterweight division, we had one big fight announcement, which was Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Gamrot. Now, if you don't know who Mateusz Gamrot is one of the top prospects at 155 pounds. And we already talked, it's tough to break into those rankings at 155 pounds, and he is getting a great opportunity here against Diego Ferreira, who is currently ranked number 11, and this is going to be an interesting fight here. This is a very, very strong matchup, and Diego Ferreira, respect to him, because he has fought some very, very tough competition. His most recent fights have been against Dariush and Gregor Gillespie. So tripling down there and taking on Gamrot is no easy task. So respect to him for his willingness to pretty much fight whoever. Now, moving on, we are going to look forward to next week's fight card, which is headlined by Vieira versus Miesha Tate. Vieira is currently ranked at the number 7 spot in the women's bantamweight rankings. And Miesha Tate is unranked, I believe. Yep. Miesha Tate's at 8. Nice. This is a really interesting fight because if Miesha Tate can win this fight, I imagine she's only one fight away from a title shot. Miesha Tate's probably someone the UFC is pushing to Amanda Nunes as quick as possible. That is probably the biggest fight you can make for Amanda Nunes outside of the Shevchenko fight. And there's a lot of questions and a lot of hurdles to jump for you to get Shevchenko versus Nunes. And Miesha Tate, I think she's going to be on a fast track to the title here. So if she can get a win, she will probably, have to fight someone like Aldana or like an Aspen Ladd or a Holly Holm and, get that title shot if she can string 2 more wins together. So this is a very impactful fight in that women 135-pound division. And I'm leaning Miesha Tate here. Vieira is very talented, but I think the experience of Miesha Tate is going to push her forward. So that's my prediction, Miesha Tate by decision. Now, in the co-main event, we have Michael Chiesa versus Sean Brady. Sean Brady is probably the number 1 prospect at welterweight right now. And for Michael Chiesa to take that chance when he has the number 6 spot next to his name, when he could have fought a lot of guys, He could have fought Neil Magny. He could have fought Bilal Muhammad. Instead, he's taking that risk of fighting Sean Brady. Now, this is probably this is a fight that is going to be very interesting because Michael Chiesa is a proven veteran at welterweight, while Sean Brady is someone who has a very interesting skill set and could provide Michael Chiesa a lot of challenges. And if Sean Brady can get a win here, he's going to be on a fast track in this welterweight division. And getting a lot of prospects at welterweight is very important right now. Whether that be Khamzat Chimaev, whether that be Sean Brady, whether that be some of the welterweights that we spoke about earlier, Usman is really running out of title challengers right now. He's beat the majority of these guys. He hasn't beaten Vicente Luque, but he hasn't really, he's probably a win away from a title shot. Leon Edwards, he beat once. That was a long time ago. So right now, if Usman gets 2 more wins, and those wins are against Edwards and Luque, then, this division isn't going to provide much for him. So if we can get some guys like Sean Brady, like Khamzat Chimaev up in the top 5, this division is going to be in a really strong place, and Usman is going to have the ability to take out the next generation of welterweights, which is something that in the long term really helps you achieve GOAT status, which is something that I believe Usman is looking for. So whenever Sean Brady fights, whenever Khamzat Chimaev fights, make sure you're watching, because those are going to be impactful, whether that be now or whether that be several years down the road. Now, we also have Rani Yanha versus Kung Hu Kang this weekend. Rani Yanha is always an interesting fighter to watch, and in this fight, I'll probably lean his way by submission. Also on the main card, we talked about this not too long ago. We've got Joanne Wood versus Talia Santos. Joanne Wood is someone who I really like in this division. I think she's a little underrated, and she's put on some good performances. But Talia Santos is also a very impressive fighter who has got 3 wins in a row against some good competition. So this is also, as much as this fight card doesn't have, massive names, we've got 3 really, really important fights that are going to play a role in some championship bouts in the near future. So I think this is another one, and right now I'm leaning Joanne Calderwood by decision. But I would not be surprised if Talia Santos can go out there and get a win. Next up on the card, we've got Adrian Yanez versus Davy Grant. Adrian Yanez, is someone a lot of people think really highly of. Davy Grant is a big step up in competition for him. Davy Grant is someone with a lot of UFC bouts, a lot of experience, and Yanez, on the other hand, is a little bit fresher in the UFC, but has shown some flashes of a lot of talent, a lot of good striking. So I'm very interested in this fight, and I'm leaning Yanez by KO here. Another prospect, we're going to skip around a little bit, another top prospect on this card, Terrence McKinney, is taking on Ferry Zayam. Now, McKinney, like Yanez, doesn't have an incredible amount of experience, but has shown some really strong flashes. Anytime you get a 6-second knockout, you're going to be looked at very highly as your career moves forward. And even if you look at the three losses on McKinney's record, he's got losses to Sean Woodson on the Contender Series. He's got a loss to Derek Minner in regional MMA, and the other one came a while back. So Terrence McKinney, he's on a 4-fight win streak against some, I'm not going to say they're great opponents, but for the level he was at, those are some strong names. And I think that he is going to be able to find a knockout here as well. And he is another one of those guys at the 155-pound division who, are working their way up to the rankings. He's a little bit further back than some of these other guys, but if he can string a couple wins in a row, he's going to be a very interesting fighter at 155 pounds. And that is going to be the last fight that we talk about on this fight card. And if you want to hear me do a breakdown on that fight card after it happens, we'll be doing that next week. And until then, this has been the Head Kick KO podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you tune in next week, and goodbye.